Who laughed? A lot of people will say, you know, when I'm working on a new client, I'll say I need lost runs. And they say, what's that? I say, it's your claims history. Well, they say, well, I didn't have any claims. I said, I believe you. But the insurance company doesn't know you. They don't know you're a good guy. They haven't met you. Haven't had coffee with. They want a piece of paper from your insurance company for the last 5 years saying, haven't had any losses. We get that and we're good to go. Technical difficulties. So the things that are on the application will be, like, we divide lessons up between your school horses and lessons given on students' own horses. There's a different rate for that. They work on your own horses, they're going to go by how many. On student-owned horses, they're going to look for a number. How much money are you making giving lessons on student-owned horses? They're going to look at age groups, experience levels. Another thing they look at is the ratio of instructors to students. But during your riding lessons, the higher the ratio gets, the higher the rate goes. So if you're 1 to 8, that's going to generate a much higher rate than 1 to 4. And they're also going to look at the independent contractors, their activity levels, their receipts. That's usually not a big charge on your policy because they should have their own, and it's handled differently. And then they want to see what the use of the horses are. What are you doing? I think the one example that came up was was it a heifer that was at the fair? Now, if you have a policy like a farm liability policy, and it's specific to your premise, and they're not going to cover your animals when they're off premise, that could be a problem if you were in that situation where you brought your heifer to the county fair and it had a problem and injured people. But those are all things I can't speak to. It only you have to look at your own policy and talk to your own agent to know for sure how you're covered and what your territory is.
Horse shows.
Mm-hmm.
I take a group of horses to a horse show. Some of mine, own horses, some of others' people's horses. One of their horses runs away, escapes, and runs 3 people over at somebody else's property, on somebody else's grounds, where the horse show is being held. It could be the Altamont Fairgrounds, it could be your backyard, it could be a horse show. Where does that hold me as the person who brought those horses there?
Was it all part of your operation?
Yeah, we went there as
Competitors.
competitors.
As a group.
Our farm went there as a group, yes.
I guess it would depend on how that was going to get broken down in terms of the liability out there. You would get sued, the person on the horse would probably get sued, and it would get shake out from there. You could, excuse me? Yeah. The lawyers get everybody. Anybody that's involved, they'll find them and bring them into the suit. Doesn't mean it'll stick, but they'll bring them in.
Is there a specific clause in a policy that covers that? I mean, is that an addendum to places that do go to shows versus?
That's a question on the application. They'll say, do you take your students to schooling shows, yes or no? And you check yes, and then you cover that activity. Explain that you do that. Everything with the equines is activity driven. So if it's not listed, if you don't list it on the application and you do it, you have a problem.
Well, I see that in school horses versus lesson horses versus owned by students.
Well, it's just a rate for how they would determine
Yeah.
what they're going to charge you for your lesson program.
Excuse me, what are activities on the fly?
like this. Activities on the fly. You have a horse that, you know, like my horse Sharpie, Mr. Sharpshooter. I've taught him how to count. I have personal liability. But I decided, well, you know what? I'm at this show, there's an amateur, but I'm gonna charge money to have people come and watch him do his counting tricks. So I got an audience of people, and while we're doing it, he sees a pig, loses his mind, and splits and hurts somebody on the way out. So now, I've done something that wasn't considered on my personal liability policy. I've had a commercial exposure. I've used him for something other than a personal use. Make sense?
Do I get my money back because it's count right? Do I get the silver?
That's another thing we like to do. How we get up in the morning.
Oh my God.
You ever saw the diving horse? He used to be down in Atlantic City. Come on. I don't think they do it anymore.
They did it over and over again, though.
They did it over and over again, yeah.
Same horse.
Yeah, they used to have one that traveled around the fairs.
So we're going to talk about the pricing considerations. A lot of times I'll have a flat rate for your acreage. A lot of companies, 160 acres and under is a certain rate. When you get over, it goes depending on different carriers, how they break it out. The next 500, the next 1,000. We already talked about clinics, who's conducting them, who has an insurance form. And charges vary according to your activities. Feature and technical differences. So the things we're going to talk about here are high-risk activities. I have limited markets for those. There's not a lot of companies that like it. The companies that do like it don't have a problem with it. There's on your commercial equine liability, there'll be like a livery exclusion, and there's always an exclusion for participants in sports participants. Like if you had a rodeo or a horse show at your property, the people that participate are not covered on your policy. Things that are also hard to cover: overnight camps, parades, pony rides. When you say, why would these things be hard to cover? But when you think about them, what's the one thing they all have in common? Public. You have people around your horses that aren't used to being around horses. That's why all those activities fall into the higher risk category, even the pony rides. And this is what will be part of your livery exclusion. We're going to get the rental of saddle animals, which you don't really see anymore. I don't have anyone that would cover you if you wanted to just rent somebody a horse to go for a ride. I do have companies that will cover guided trail rides. And what you're talking about, going out on the trail with a horse after a lesson, that's not considered a trail ride. People get in trouble when they fill out their own applications. They'll say, do you have trail rides? And they check yes. Well, what they're looking at, the company's looking at on that application, they're looking at guided trail rides.
Or novice people, yeah.
People coming off the street.
People coming off the street, someone who's never been on a horse in their life. You have a string of 10, 12 horses, 20 horses lined up. You have a bunch of wranglers that are ready to take people out for a ride. Usually in most places, they'll put them up on the horse. They'll put them in a corral to make sure that they're not going to just fall off. Well, some people do. And then once they're satisfied that you could stay on the horse, you get to go for a ride. Pack trips, sleigh rides, carriage rides, they're all in your livery exclusion. They do, that's getting very popular. So these are the things that people aren't covered for on your policy. Rodeo events, racing, vaulting, hunts, except for the master of the hounds, whatever that is. Jousting games, which are actually getting very popular, and polo matches and practices. And we'll talk about care, custody, and control. Everybody have an idea what that's for? That's for the animals that you have in your care, that you're boarding, that belong to others. Now, a lot of people will be like, well, I don't want to pay for that. I don't want to have care, custody, and control. You know, no one's going to sue me. You know, I know everybody. Yada yada yada.
We're all friends.
We're all friends. He would never sue me
Till the money comes out.
till the bills come in. Now, the biggest thing I tell people is whether or not you want to have this coverage. If you do not have it, you do not have any money for defense, which will probably be your biggest outlay, because the defense costs are probably going to be more than the judgment would be for the horse. So I tell people, you really should have it. You need it. If you're boarding horses, you have horses that belong to other people, and you don't have it, you're just leaving a big gap in your coverage. What's the usual retainer?
Start about 2,500 for something simple like that.
Sorry, that. They go up.
That buys you about 10 hours.
Anybody have any questions about care, custody, and control? Now, you could be responsible for calling a vet if the horse that's in your boarding facility colics. And if the person did the right thing, when they'll have their information, where the horse is, who to call. And if you don't,